When did transgender get so normal and mainstreamed? How long ago was the transgender ideology or idea introduced into our culture? My guess is it's much earlier than you think. Before you even knew the definition of transgenderism or a transgender, there were laws being put in place equating trans injustice to racial inequality. And subtle language changes in popular Amazon shows. Today, we're going to dig in to where the transgender thing came from and the interesting and not talked enough about relationship between Obergefell, the gay marriage Supreme Court decision, feminism, and our modern moral chaos. Guys, go follow us on Rumble in case digital assassins ever remove my YouTube channel because of wrong speak. Give us a rating and review. Help us reach more people. We really appreciate it. I appreciate you guys doing this. I read all of them. I appreciate the positive, the negative, the ideas you offer. Send in the reviews, hit 5 stars. It helps the show explode. And we would love to have you part of our resistance army at the White Rose Resistance. Become an ally of the White Rose Resistance if you believe that we need to make the local church great again. And our organization, God has positioned providentially, humbly, so gratefully to be able to actually get in front of American evangelicals and get them fired up and engaged with our resistance chapters, our training, our discipleship, our films, our book club, our master classes, our pro-life training, our podcast, our in-person activism, all that we're doing to awaken the local church to take dominion and responsibility to fight against these evils locally, primarily and first and foremostly in ending abortion. Roe v. Wade overturned, it's back to the states. That means locally, we're more responsible. That's what we're focused on at the White Rose Resistance. If you believe in that, go to thewhiterose.life, thewhiterose.life. Join at $35 a month as an ally. You get your battle box in the mail within the next 6 weeks, and you join our White Rose app, and you can check out all the resources we have on there. If you join at $70 a month, we call that air support. You join our book club, and so we read books together. Live, we talk about him live on Zoom. The next book is The God of Sex by Peter Jones, and we just read When Harry Became Sally, Responding to the Transgender Moment by Ryan T. Anderson. Fascinating books to help you better understand your culture so you can stand for truth, for life, for liberty, for justice, for common sense. You get all that when you join. We so appreciate your generosity. Thank you for helping us restore sanity, awaken and inspire the local church to take back their mantle and their place on the wall. Let's get into it. This is the Seth Gruber Show. Why does everything have to be so gay? Why is everything so sexually perverted today? And who can we blame? Okay. Did you guys know that right after the Supreme Court found a fictional right to sodomy as a marital right in our Constitution, hidden somewhere in invisible ink? I don't know, it was somewhere there. I mean, I know Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton said in 2003 and 2005 that there's no such thing as gay marriage. We should stop having this argument. Marriage is a man and a woman. But somehow in 2015, in June of 2015, which is, by the way, if you don't know why June is like we're told is all about Pride Month and like rainbows and, you know, gender unicorns and gender breads and naked men riding their bicycles through New York City. The reason they called June the gay month is because that's when Obergefell v. Hodges found a fictional right to gay marriage in our Constitution. So, but I want to trace some ideas, okay? I want to connect some movements. I want to put the pieces together of seemingly disparate ideologies to see if we can't reconstruct a puzzle that gives us a picture of how all this happened. You guys cool with that? I think that's why most people like this show. Almost immediately after the Supreme Court ruled in Obergefell v. Hodges that now two dudes, you know what? They can be married and it's fundamentally the same as a man and a woman. Okay, right after that, the Obama administration redefined sex to mean gender identity in our nation's civil rights laws, and then imposed these gender identity policies on schools and healthcare providers nationwide. Did you know that? Immediately following. I mean, one of the most popular, that doesn't mean good, that doesn't mean like flourishing, that doesn't mean beautiful, it doesn't mean ordered, it just means popular Supreme Court decisions in American history, Obergefell. Right after that, sex gets redefined to mean gender identity, and now we can discriminate against Christians or anyone who won't support the right of a dude to take his pants off in your daughter's swim locker room after swim practice. Whoa, that happened fast. Is that a coinkydink? Is it a coinkydink that sex gets redefined to mean gender identity by the Obama administration right after Obergefell? Now, listen, I know. Correlation does not mean causation. But sometimes I want to respond to that. Don't urinate on my leg and tell me it's raining. So, okay, it's the same thing with the Wuhan Institute of Virology, right? In Wuhan, China, right? Do you remember this? COVID didn't come from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, where they were studying coronaviruses that came from bats. It came from the wet market selling bats 10 miles away. We were all like, It's like, I know correlation doesn't mean causation, but also maybe sometimes it does. Don't relieve yourself on my leg and say it's raining. Okay. So, like, we have a semi-functioning prefrontal cortex still. Like, some of us can still kind of like look at things and go, well, that's a massive event and that's a massive event. I betcha there's some relationship. Okay. So what does this mean? It means that the Marxists and leftist strategists knew from the beginning that destroying marriage, that destroying marriage is intrinsically linked to destroying our understanding of what men and women are. That's the thesis for the show today. Okay, the cultural Marxists and the leftist strategists, activists who actually are quite, crafty. They're actually pretty smart in how they engage the culture. I mean, their ideas are stupid, but they're quite smart in how they engage, how patient they are to unravel their ideas in the public square. It means that from the beginning, they understood that destroying marriage is intrinsically linked to destroying our understanding of what a man is and what a woman is. While the media and the activist left had already been pushing to mainstream transgenderism and grant whatever the heck trans rights are, I still don't know what trans rights are, to gender confused mentally ill individuals, most Americans had never even spoken about transgenderism prior to Obergefell. So what is it? It's basically been 10 years. Huh? Yeah, we're basically at 10 years since Obergefell. It was June 2015. And prior to that point, while the media had been pushing this ideology, remember the Bruce Jenner stuff, some of the stuff even before that, okay, most Americans weren't dealing with that ideology in their personal life. They weren't dealing with it at their school. They weren't dealing with it at the workplace. They weren't dealing with it at the city council. They weren't dealing with it at the school board. They weren't dealing with it. I mean, most people at that point didn't even know anyone. Most people didn't even know anyone who was insisting on chopping off their genitals, chemically castrating themselves, and screaming at you to call them their new name. Do you see how fast this has all happened? Is what I'm trying to say. All of that changed very quickly after Obergefell. It's perceptible. It's noticeable. It's almost axiomatic if you pay attention. And many of you listening to the sound of my voice right now, you've been watching the culture wars longer than me simply because you're older. Some of you are in your 40s and 50s. I'm 33. Am I 33? Yeah, I think I'm 33. So you're aware of this even more than me. You're aware of this basically being a strange thing you heard a talking head say on CNN because you accidentally hit the change channel button. And you're like, what? Transgender? What? All right. Bruce Jenner, didn't he win the decathlon or something? All right. I bet if you're over 35 and you stopped and thought for a little bit, I bet you could, if you went back to your social media, you went back to your journal, you went back to your memories, I bet you would observe a discernible shift in the trans mania ideology in the public square right after the legalization of quote unquote gay marriage. That's not a coincidence. Okay? And it's weird, right? We're going to get into all of this today, but it's weird. Why? Because like the gays, okay, for lack of a better term, same-sex attracted individuals, okay, they initially believed that like men existed, like because they're kind of into men. So I think they kind of know what men are. And so I guess like homosexually attracted individuals believe that like the person they're attracted to is actually something that exists in the real world, and you can know what a man is, which means you can know what a woman is, right? But the decision that they celebrate every June, coincidentally, is the decision that has led to the erasure of women and our understanding of men and women. That's not a coincidence. Let's go back to right before Obergefell, the year I graduated college, 2014. Amazon released a comedy called Transparent. It's about a father transitioning to become a mother. So, you know, this was likely like a year or less before Obergefell. The producer was clearly pushing a trans ideology in the show with bathrooms labeled as gender neutral. The producer had a transformative action program, giving preference to trans candidates for all positions working on the show, right? So just like, you know, the whole DEI stuff of like, we want to hire black people. Why? Well, just because they're black, not because they're more gifted, right? Like because of this insanity, I know this sounds crazy, but I would love to be black because the white rose resistance would be so much more successful. like black privilege is a real thing actually today. I think it's all crap. I hate all this stuff because I think that we should care about someone's ideas, their worldview, their faith, like how they see the world, and not their melanin, because their values and their worldviews are going to be the things that impact how they raise their children, how they vote, and the kind of moral choices they make, right? That's what I care about. I don't care about melanin, but because, you know, we've DEI'd the heck out of everything in America, like white privilege ain't a thing. Like black privilege is a thing. Like if, as the CEO of the White Rose Resistance, with how much I speak around the country, if I was black, I would have way more opportunities. I'm just saying. Anyways, it's the same thing, right? These action programs that say we're going to hire people not based off of competency or experience, but based off of, you know, their sexual attractions, their mental illnesses, or their melanin. And in this case, the producer of this show, Transparent, was hiring people simply because they had mental illnesses, because they were men who thought they were women, or they were women who thought they were men. Okay. However, the lead character of the show, a transgender woman, okay, so that means a man, okay, was played by a cisgender man. That means, guys, okay, a man who knows he's a man. So when someone says transgender woman, they mean a man who's mentally ill and believes himself to be a woman. And when they say a cisgender man, they mean a man who knows that he's a man. Okay, so a man who knows that he's a man was portraying a man who thinks he's a woman on an Amazon show called Transparent. Okay, and guess what? People got pissed. People got so angry. because he's not representative. Why wasn't a gender confused mentally ill man playing a gender confused mentally ill man? Why did you have a straight white cisgender man playing a transgender woman? Oh, I hate that I'm using the left's lexicon right now. Anyways, so people got angry. Fast forward to 2016, Obergefell's already happened. We already have a constitutional fictional right to gay marriage. And shortly after Obergefell, the director of this show, Jill Soloway, said this in an interview. She said, "The time has come where it's unacceptable for cis men," remember, men who know they're men, "to play trans women, men who think they're women." She says, "It's pretty ironic coming from me where I have a TV show where a cis man plays a trans woman." Okay, so shortly after we legalized quote unquote gay marriage, one of the first shows that was pushing and inculcating a trans ideology into the show and what the show was about comes out, and they basically say, in other words, it's bigotry when men who know they are men portray men who think they are women on screen, but it's equality in progress for men who think they are women to cosplay as women in a mockery of womanhood. Did you follow that? I'm not sure I did. By the end of 2015, just 5 months after Obergefell, the gay marriage decision, Glamour magazine gave the Woman of the Year award to Bruce Jenner, who then was insisting on being called Caitlyn. 5 months after the fictional right to gay marriage. Fortune magazine wrote during the summer of 2015, which was like 25 days, 30 days after the Obergefell decision, that this summer was, quote, shaping up as the moment when transgender went mainstream. That was Fortune magazine like a month or less after Obergefell. 18 months after Obergefell, National Geographic released a special issue on what it called the gender revolution. I still see these sometimes in like bookstores or stuff like that. And you guys have all seen this. Okay, we have it here today. The subscriber cover of National Geographic featured this kid, Avery Jackson, a 9-year-old boy who thinks he is a girl. And National Geographic, I think on the front page, said, this is the first transgender person to appear on the cover of National Geographic. It's a boy. It's a little boy. It's just a kid. You sicko perverts. The cover text quotes 9-year-old Avery boy saying this: "The best thing about being a girl is now I don't have to pretend to be a boy." Okay, wow. National Geographic, 18 months after Obergefell. So, the end of 2016. 11 months after Obergefell, in May 2016, less than a year after the gay marriage decision, the Department of Education and the Department of Justice jointly issued a Dear Colleague letter mandating that all public schools allow access to sex-specific facilities based on gender identity rather than based on biological sex. 11 months. Oh, that's the month I got married, actually. May 2016. So the same Title IX law designed to protect women and girls from discrimination at schools would now be used to violate their privacy, safety, and equality. Right after Obergefell. That same month, May 2016, the Office for Civil Rights at the Department of Health and Human Services announced that a ban on sex discrimination in Obamacare, Obamacare, was now being interpreted to ban gender identity discrimination. Meaning this would require all healthcare plans regulated under Obamacare to cover sex reassignment procedures and all relevant physicians to perform them. In other words, you will chop off this person's genitals or you can't be a medically licensed doctor. And hospitals will be shut down if they don't go along with it under Obamacare. So what is this insanity? Like, there's so much more we could get into, right? But we don't have time to. Incredible conservative commentator and thinker Ryan T. Anderson points out that a month after HHS declared sex reassignment to be a civil right, like, yeah, that's right, like under the 1964 Civil Rights Act, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services released a report explaining that they were not mandating insurance coverage of sex reassignment surgery because clinical evidence did not demonstrate it to be beneficial. I want to make sure that you grasp that. Okay. A month after the Health and Human Services under the Obama administration declared sex reassignment surgical genital removal to be a civil right, because if you denied to do that, then like you're the same as a racist who would bar a black person into your restaurant. Like, they're treating those as equivalents. Okay. At the same time, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services said they were not mandating insurance coverage of sex reassignment surgery because there wasn't evidence that it was beneficial. So, in other words, while Medicare plans run by the federal government were not required to cover sex reassignment surgery procedures, the federal government civil rights office was requiring it of private insurance plans and physicians covered in those plans. What? Make it make sense. By September 2016, just 15 months after Obergefell, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, do you remember this one? The Department of Housing and Urban Development required shelters for the homeless and for battered women, among others, to allow access based on gender identity. So, I don't know, like a pimp, pervert, or sex trafficker dude could now say he's a woman and that he was coming out of like a rape, like abusive quote unquote relationship or something, get into a battered women's house and begin raping the other women because you have to let people in based on their gender identity. What? And of course, no exemption was granted for shelter run by Christians or religious organizations. That's 15 months after Obergefell. Just 11 months after Obergefell, in May of 2016, oh man, I remember this one. The Obama administration sued the state of North Carolina for violating the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And you're thinking, wait, what did they do? Oh my gosh, did a school in North Carolina not let a black kid try out for a sports team? Did some racist, like, hidden KKK member who runs a restaurant not let a black person eat it? Or no, it has nothing to do with that. The reason the Obama administration sued the state of North Carolina was because of their House Bill 2 that determined that access to bathrooms, locker rooms, and other sex-specific facilities in public schools should be based on biological sex as indicated on a birth certificate. So because North Carolinians thought that, you know what, a 19-year-old freshman at UNC Wilmington shouldn't be allowed to go get naked in the girls' locker room, that now you're the same as the KKK. The Attorney General at the time, Loretta Lynch, she was a piece of work, suggested that this was the same thing as banning blacks from white spaces. When she announced the lawsuit against North Carolina, Loretta Lynch said, "It was not so very long ago that states, including North Carolina, had signs above restrooms, water fountains, and on public accommodations, keeping people out based upon a distinction without a difference." You know what's the insanity about this too, right? Like, you're probably screaming this at your phone or a car right now. Yo, it was your Democrat Party who was responsible for all of that. Like, it's hilarious to me. The radical leftist Democrats who throw slavery or Jim Crow laws, and they toss these around as sort of ways to bludgeon their political opponents over the head by comparing them to those racists back then, when it's like, it was your party, Democrats, that was behind literally all of that. Why should we believe you're on the right side of history now? It's highly frustrating. In other words, opposing the full-scale normalization of a mental illness called transgenderism means that you're the same as the KKK and racists who didn't want black people to eat at your favorite restaurant. That's what Attorney General Loretta Lynch meant in May of 2016 when the Obama administration sued the state of North Carolina. All of that insanity and more that we don't have time to get into happening within a 2-year window. Within a 2-year window of the redefinition of marriage in the Supreme Court decision called Obergefell v. Hodges. How did that happen? Well, first, we want to thank our sponsor of the Seth Gruber Show, Every Life Diaper Company, America's pro-life diaper company, baby, right? You guys, you got to go get your diapers and wipes and now baby shampoos from Every Life. I know the co-founders, Michael and Sarah Gable-Seifert. Sarah Gable's the CEO, incredible team, incredible friends. Met them during the scamdemic, right? Friendship forged in fire as we were standing against the feminazis and gay communists in Orange County as they were shutting down the state. They're incredible people. They're parents themselves. Their whole team is lovely. My wife and I use Every Life. We have it shipped. We do the subscription model. You should do that too. Use promo code SETH10, SETH10 for 10% off your first order. Let them know that we sent you. That's actually important if you want to support the show. And tell the lady who runs the nursery at your church. Like, wouldn't it be great if your church wasn't like putting diapers on the baby butts at your church and paying pro-abortion diaper companies? We got to sacrifice. Right? We have to stop shopping at companies we might like when they hate you, the unborn, and your faith and your values. This is one of the ways we win the culture war. We shop in alignment with our values. Go to everylife.com, everylife.com. Use promo code SETH10 for 10% off your first order. Thank you, Every Life. So how did this happen? Who do we blame? I want to blame someone today. Who do we blame for transgenderism's mainstreaming? And is it connected to the redefinition of marriage? That's an interesting question. Not too many shows in America or in the conservative media space will ask these questions, actually, or dive as deep as we do and my team does here at the Seth Gruber Show. That's why we love your help and support. Give us 5 stars. Leave us a rating and review. We really appreciate it. Send this to your pastor or your woke gay uncle before Rainbow Month. I blame feminism. That's who I blame. I blame feminism for the erasure of women and for the entire transgender pronoun patty cake mafia and the damage that it's done to families, children, schools, churches, fathers, mothers, sexual virility and procreative potential and more. I blame feminism. I think feminism is to blame for almost all of this. And of course, the silent churches and pastors throughout the 20th century who traded their birthright for a bowl of porridge, and they cared more about the accolades and attaboys of the entrenched political elite and the Democrat Party and their invitations by Klaus Schwab with Rick Warren on a private jet to Davos every year. It's the idol of cultural respectability instead of faithfulness to Jesus. I blame them too, but I mostly blame feminism. Feminism, everyone basically agrees feminism starts with Mary Wollstonecraft. We did a recent episode on who Mary Wollstonecraft was and why she was the first feminist. I think it was a really interesting show. We got a lot of positive feedback and comments. Go check it out from a few weeks ago if you're interested in a full-scale treatment of Mary Wollstonecraft. But her 1792, that's right, 1792. So we're talking right before Napoleon, right? We're in the throes of the French Revolution. Her 1792 book, A Vindication of the Rights of Women. This is where most of this rot begins. And she defined women based on being a human creature. By the way, similar to Kinsey did the same thing. One of the ways that a lot of the people at Indiana University in Kinsey's days didn't know that he was filming porno films in his attic and having orgies and shoving objects down his male genitals and circumcising himself without anesthesia and filming sodomy acts with his wife and friends. Many of the reasons people didn't know that was happening at the time, sorry to get real with you, but is because he said that he was going to be filming animal creatures, but he defined humans as part of the animal kingdom. So a lot of leftist feminist progressives have done this because they don't believe that there's really anything unique or exemplary or exceptional about being a Homo sapient, a human being. Mary Wollstonecraft did this too. She defined woman as a human creature rather than on the sex-specific qualities that only women have. So to her, the capacity for motherhood is not essential to being a female human. This notion or understanding of a female that is separated or divorced from her being a wife or mother is essential to understanding the next 230 years of feminism. Let me say that again. Mary Wollstonecraft, the first feminist, her understanding of a female that is divorced from her being a wife or mother is essential to understanding the next 230 years of feminism. Mary Wollstonecraft wrote, "I wish to show that the first object of laudable ambition is to obtain a character as a human being, regardless of the distinction of sex." Regardless of the distinction of sex? I bet if you're new to the culture wars and you're a new listener to the show and I hadn't told you who that was, you would have thought that that was maybe a second wave feminist from the mid 60s. That's Mary Wollstonecraft from 1792. Mary's son-in-law, Percy Shelley. Percy married Mary Jr., Mary Wollstonecraft's daughter. Her daughter wrote Frankenstein at 18 years old, by the way. So Percy Shelley married Mary Wollstonecraft's daughter and continued his mother-in-law's radical tradition and teaching, but he takes it much, much further. He called sex differences detestable distinctions. Have you noticed this about like leftism? They hate distinctions. Distinctions between the left and right. Distinctions between men and women. Important distinctions between what it means to be conservative and what it means to be a radical humanist leftist. They especially hate distinctions in the natural order or in the creation order, because distinctions in creation highly suggest a creator. So the left has always hated distinctions. Percy Shelley called sex differences detestable distinctions, and he said that they would, quote, surely be abolished in a future state of being. What? Right. The left's belief that we can kind of remake ourselves, right, into something else. This is a key aspect to understanding the next iterations on the horizon of the same radical revolutionary tradition in the 21st century. AI. This belief that this future state of being won't even be a body at all. They have this belief that we can upload the consciousness to the cloud and achieve digital immortality, right? Anyways, that's not possible. Don't worry about it. But a lot of these beliefs were core to early revolutionaries as well. As author Carrie Gress points out, the inference is that womanhood is something to be shunned, while being a human creature is a generic and unmaternal form is to be embraced, right? It's sort of this like androgynous human creature that exists somewhere in the ether, where men and women are just completely superfluous. Okay. So Wollstonecraft, remember, we're about to blame feminism, right? And then we're going to connect it to gay marriage that fast-tracked the mainstreaming of transgenderism. Wollstonecraft begins to blaze a trail that is followed and lengthened by the first wave feminists, right? Everyone thinks of equal voting rights, right? When you think of the first wave feminists, what did they call themselves? The suffragettes. You probably think of equal voting rights, right? Like that's all we really, and we think that's a great thing, and we don't really study that. We don't really understand like why there was such a fight over that. And we just think, oh, that's great. All the first wave feminists were beautiful because they gave women the right to vote. I want to suggest there's more to the story. Leading first wave feminists, like, have you heard of Elizabeth Cady Stanton? Okay, like, very, very, very influential top first wave feminists, great friends with Susan B. Anthony. Elizabeth Cady Stanton and many of these first wave feminists are not the heroes of Western civilization and the family that they've been turned into today. Stanton published the first feminist Bible. Did you know that? It's called the Woman's Bible, where they just removed gendered language or depictions of women in the family that they didn't like. Because the Bible's kind of into this idea like that the man is the head of the household. It's in the Bible. Christ is the head of the church, and so the man is the head of the wife. And this doesn't, by the way, this doesn't mean injustice or inequality. Well, it does mean inequality in the sense that we're not equal. Like man does not equal woman. We'll get into that more in a second. Man does not equal woman because they're actually different. Right. I'm saying inequality in the sense that we're obviously different. Obviously, we believe men and women are equal in value and dignity, right? And rights. But the Bible's very clear that the man is the head of the wife or the head of the household, as Christ is the head of the church. Is that demeaning? No. I'm pretty sure that Jesus submits to the Father. If there is any way to take this cup from me, but not my will, but yours. But then at the same time, Christians say, but wait, Jesus is God. The doctrine of the Trinity is that Jesus, the Son, God the Father, the Holy Spirit, the Godhead, and that they're actually like equals. Like one God, three persons, one God. So Jesus is God, but he submits himself. So does that mean that Jesus is lesser than the Holy Spirit or God the Father? No. It's a similar, that's where Christians get their understanding of how the family is structured, right? The woman is not less because she submits to the husband, as Christ is not less because he submits to the Father. Okay, so anyways, they didn't like those depictions in the Bible. So the suffragettes, these first wave feminists that everyone like loves, they're like, they were rewriting the Bible. It's a feminist Bible, guys. Okay, I figured you didn't know that because I only learned that a little bit ago. In an 1868 speech entitled The Destructive Male, oh, there we go, toxic masculinity, Elizabeth Cady Stanton says, the male element is a destructive force. Stern, selfish, aggrandizing, loving war, violence, conquest, acquisition, breeding in the material and moral world alike, discord, disorder, disease, and death. Wow, tell me what you really think. She says, see what a record of blood and cruelty the pages of history reveal. So what, it would have been better if women led? Have you ever seen the differences between how pompous, spoiled, 16-year-old juniors in high school treat their female friends as to how 16-year-old spoiled brat 16-year-old males treat each other in high school? Women treat each other way worse. This is good. Such a politically incorrect episode today. Okay. Dudes might like punch each other in the face and then like be like, dude, screw you. Now let's go out for a beer. Okay. Women will murder each other. I'm not saying men won't murder each other. They're equally capable of that. But okay, I think you get what I'm saying. Okay. Like women can be just as brutish as men. It's because of our fallen nature. Okay. I'm not saying that fundamentally women are worse sinners. The playing field's level at the cross. Adam stood right there and watched Eve and approved of her eating the apple. Like the playing field's level at the cross. I'm just saying this toxic masculinity attack on men from one of the most popular first wave feminists, attributing to men all things bad in the world. So what's the other option? Would it have been better if all women led? A matriarchy? I'm not convinced it would have been any better or that there would have been less bloodshed. We're pretty fallen, screwed up creatures. But sort of this attack on men, not as capable of restoration, biblical stewardship and leadership and protection when submitted to God, but just writing all men off as responsible for all the ills of the world. Isn't that what you see today? I feel like I'm reading Simone de Beauvoir, not Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Stanton said that what America needs is, quote, a new evangel. Do you know that word evangel? Evangelism? She said, we need a new evangel of womanhood to exalt purity, virtue, morality, true religion, to lift man up into the higher realms of thought and action. Evangel means gospel. So Elizabeth Cady Stanton is preaching a religion of feminism. Do you know about the first American Women's Rights Convention? Have you heard of this? 1848. Seneca Falls, led by Elizabeth Cady Stanton. The feminists there in 1848 expressed a disdain for Christianity and even performed seances in the basement. That's where you try to pray and awaken the dead. However, their focus was on what? The right to vote, right? The women's suffrage, the suffragettes, the first wave feminists. However, did you know this? This is fascinating conversation. I've had this conversation before with my friend, Dr. Nancy Pearcey, and I would recommend to you her book, The Toxic War on Masculinity, How Christianity Reconciles the Sexes. But did you know, this is so fascinating, most women opposed women's suffrage. Let me say that again. Most women in this era were in opposition to the women's suffrage movement, led by the suffragettes like Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Did you know that? Why? The reason why will give us a clue as to first wave feminism's connection to and resulting conclusion of transgenderism. As Dr. Nancy Pearcey writes, many historians are still puzzled by this today, by the large-scale female opposition to women's suffrage. In fact, this is so crazy. In fact, leading feminist of the era, Alice Stone Blackwell, wrote this. She said, "The chief obstacle to equal suffrage is the indifference and opposition of women." That's not my opinion. The first wave feminists were screaming and blaming women for preventing their own voting rights, essentially. Ooh, Susan B. Anthony, here we go. She said, "In the indifference, the inertia, the apathy of women lies the greatest obstacle to their enfranchisement." You kind of hear this from second and third wave feminists, right? In the 60s, 70s, and now even today with the radical third wave feminists, is sort of that like women are living under sort of a delusion. They're secretly oppressed whether they know it or not. Even if they're happy or think they're happy, they have to be woke up to their enslavement. Same language. Isn't that interesting? Same language from Susan B. Anthony at the same era. That it's women's indifference and apathy that's the greatest obstacle to their enfranchisement, meaning like, why are you a traitor to your own sex? Women's opposition to women's suffrage had to do with their view of the family as the basic unit of society. This is maybe more important than almost anything else I'll say on the show today. And what makes up the family? Okay. Women's opposition to voting rights, to suffrage, had to do with their view of the family as the basic unit of society. And what makes up the family? A man and a woman. What makes up a family? A recognition of the unique and valuable differences of men and women, and the resulting children that come from that union. There's an assumption of shared values, shared religion that unite the family. One of the anti-suffrage groups, okay, so women who were setting themselves up in opposition to Stanton and Susan B. Anthony. One anti-suffrage group wrote in 1894, quote, "The household, not the individual, is the unit of the state, and the vast majority of women are represented by household suffrage." Isn't that interesting? Another anti-suffragist said that the vote, like the woman's vote, would, quote, "strike at the family as the self-governing unit upon which the state is built." So women were saying the family is that which the state is built upon, and the family needs to be treated as the centerpiece of society. Wow. And one other anti-suffragist said that this would, quote, "shift the basis of our government from the family as a unit to the individual," end quote. Those are the words of women, I guess, who want to disenfranchise themselves. Do you really believe that? Do you believe that all those women in all these groups said these things because they hated their own gender and they wanted to prevent themselves getting full equality? I don't think so. So the first wave feminists give birth to this new concept. Well, It's kind of not new, right? It's actually as old as time itself, right? You do you. Be selfish, treat yourself, right? You're your own God. But it is a newer concept in America at this time, right? That the family doesn't really matter. That it's just the individual that matters. By the way, this kind of requires a primer on social contract theory. This whole shift from the family as the basic unit and building block of society to the individual. So you can thank people like Thomas Hobbes, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and John Stuart Mill for social contract theory. It treats people as atomized individuals, each seeking their own raw interest. So concepts like duty, obligation, honor, sacrifice are all rendered meaningless because, duty to who? Obligation to who? Sacrifice to who? The individual is the basic unit of society. And so the problem with that is that this is kind of what Thomas Hobbes says in his book Leviathan, which, when does he write Leviathan? Is it the 1500s? 16th century, if I'm remembering correctly. The problem with that, according to Thomas Hobbes, is when everyone lives like that, right? Like, I just sprung out of the ground like a mushroom. I don't have a family I'm accountable to. I don't have people I have obligations to. I'm just my own man. The problem with that is when everyone lives like that, we end up killing each other. The problem with that is that when we live like that, we just have a bunch of bastard children and fatherless and motherless kids. So we come together to create social contracts for the preservation of society. So in other words, hey, I won't kill you if you won't kill me. Okay? This is social contract theory. According to this theory, a social institution then is no longer defined as an organic unity with a common good, because we're just all atomized beings, right? Living in isolation from one another, seeking our own pleasures. This is the total opposite to the Western tradition of the family. What is conservatism? What is the conservative tradition? You didn't pick your parents, you didn't pick your siblings, you didn't pick your city, you didn't build your own crib, you didn't change your own diaper, you didn't nurse yourself, right? You didn't check your own temperature when you had a fever, right? Okay, so the conservative American tradition of the family is someone else wiped your butt, taught you to walk, taught you to talk, taught you to read and support yourself, so you have obligations and duties to your family first, your community, your grandparents, okay, your family, your city, okay? This is conservatism in a nutshell. Social contract theory comes from a radical tradition of progressives and leftists from hundreds of years ago who all hated Christendom. And they hated the Christians who gave birth to ordered society. So first wave feminism is a link in that long chain. I just explained it to you. You can go back to like Thomas Hobbes. Okay, I think it's mid 1500s. I mean, you're talking maybe 200 years or more before Mary Wollstonecraft in the French Revolution. Like this whole idea that really we're just atomized individuals seeking our own self-interests, and that's the basis of society. That's not a new idea. That's a super old idea. And it's the basic undergirding foundational view that drove first wave feminists like the suffragettes in shifting the basic unit of society from the family. So so the man had the voting rights because he's the head of the household. Okay. And by the way, when you're married and having kids, watch this. The founders kind of believe that you had a more vested interest in the future because you're having babies. A drunk off of his rear end 20-year-old sophomore who's sleeping around at UC Berkeley and forcing his girlfriend to have abortions for the kids that he procreates, and he's half high off of Haitian oregano, is not very vested in the future of his country. When you're married and you're having children, you are. That was the founders' understanding of voting, actually. And so the vote wasn't necessarily a vestige of chauvinism that wanted to keep women under the thumb of the patriarchy. It was an acknowledgement of the central role of the family. The man's vote was essentially the woman's vote. They would have been united in religion, values, and worldview. Okay? So That's the difference here. First wave feminism is a link in that long chain of attacks against what we call Christendom. And their fight for voting rights, I know this is controversial, but their fight for voting rights for women, whether intentional or accidental, helped shift America's understanding of the family as the center and most important aspect of society to the individual. As Dr. Nancy Pearcey brilliantly explains, women were so concerned and opposed to women's suffrage because she said, quote, it struck a blow to the concept of male responsibility. Watch this. She said, for if society accepted that a man voted solely as an individual, then it no longer held him morally responsible for representing the common good of the entire household. She says, women were concerned that universal suffrage would reduce men's sense of accountability for everyone in the household. It's hard to argue with that. It's hard to argue now that first wave feminism was a good thing. There's so much more. We're going to continue unfolding this link, but first, the last stand is coming up in Downey, California on June 21st, 2025. Have you gotten your ticket yet? Join us. This is going to be epic. One-day Christian festival with worship, speakers, activity, and fellowship. Why? Because in order to overcome our culture of death, we must usher in a culture of life. And historically, it has only been the church that has held the line against a culture of death. We'll have speakers like David Harris Jr., Alex Clark, Riley Gaines, Heidi St. John, Pastor Jack Hibbs, Victor Marks, Lou Engle, and worship with Ben Fuller, 10th Avenue North, Influence Music, and more. But most important, the fellowship with like-minded believers and culture warriors who understand that if you want to make America great again, we actually have to ban abortion. But as are you seeing what's happening in the news? The resistance is far from over. Family and biblical values are still under attack. And until our country turns to Jesus, it is the church's responsibility to stand now. I want to see you there. This will be a life-changing event. Bring a friend, bring your family, bring your church. Go to thelaststand.com, thelaststand.com, and get your ticket today and use code SETH10 for 10% off your ticket sales. I'll see you at the last stand. So, from Mary Wollstonecraft, 1792, y'all, and the first wave feminists of the second half of the 19th century, or up until the end, in some cases, we get a construction, we get a definition and construction of womanhood from them, of woman, that is divorced from sex-specific qualities. From Mary Wollstonecraft and the suffragettes, first wave feminism, we get an atomized individual that is first and foremost a human being, a sort of superfluous creature, indistinguishable from men except for that genitalia part. From here, it is now but a small step to second wave feminism. Let me do it for you. Leading second wave feminist, one of the leading second wave feminists was Simone de Beauvoir, a French radical feminist. I think she had armpit hair. Sorry, bad joke. She writes, one is not born, but rather becomes a woman. Okay. She says, no biological, no psychological or economic fate determines the figure that the human female presents in society. It is civilization, man, as a whole that produces this creature, intermediate between male and eunuch, which is described as feminine. What a weirdo. Have you noticed what a demeaning low view of the body most feminists and leftists or humanists or materialists have? That's a very demeaning view of the body we just read from Simone de Beauvoir. She calls a woman an intermediate between male and eunuch, and this is described as feminine. Alrighty. So essentially, it's society that teaches girls to think of themselves as the second sex, defined primarily by their subordination to men. Kate Millett, we've talked about her on this show before, and Betty Friedan would continue this same line of writing and teaching, okay, working off of the writings and thoughts of Simone de Beauvoir. You might remember Kate Millett is the one who said, what are we here for? To make revolution. What kind of revolution? The cultural revolution. And how do we make cultural revolution? By destroying the American family. And how do we do that? By destroying the American patriarch. And how do we destroy the American patriarch? By taking away his power. And how do we take away his power? By destroying monogamy. And how do we destroy monogamy? By promoting pornography, abortion, homosexuality. They responded. Okay, and this was this sort of like Maoist struggle session that Kate Millett's sister, Mallory Millett, reports having attended and watched happen at a lesbian gathering in Greenwich Village, New York City, the same place that Margaret Sanger came out of. So what's the point? Create butch, superfluous women who are defined not in their, who are defined not by their differences to men, but as superfluous, sort of eunuch, androgynous sort of creatures. And if we can usher in this radical egalitarianism and then promote a bunch of vice and porn, we'll destroy the American family, because the American family is led by the American male, and screw men. They're responsible for the patriarchy and the subjugation of women. So it always comes back to this hatred of the family. And yet it was the family that was being vociferously defended by most women when first wave feminism began to rise. Isn't that interesting? So the second wave feminism is a sort of natural progression or next step from first wave feminism. Betty Friedan, remember the feminist mystique? Okay, all of these people carry on Simone de Beauvoir's legacy. At the heart of the argument or belief then is that the female body, particularly its capacity for bearing children, is at odds with women's freedom, right? Do you remember when these radical feminists were dressing up in Handmaid's Tale outfits when Roe versus Wade got overturned and they were interrupting church services? And what were they chanting? Without this basic right, women can't be free. So without the right to slaughter our own offspring, we are not free. Because men don't have uteruses and they don't have to go through this. So freedom now means, it means the freedom to kill your own children. So I believe feminism was always going to lead us to abortion, actually. So Simone de Beauvoir went as far as to say that women actually must not be allowed to make the choice between staying home and being a mother and entering the workforce. This is insane. There's this debate, actually. This was one of the lines of demarcation between Betty Friedan and Simone de Beauvoir. In a famous debate, Betty Friedan argued for women to be able to choose whatever they want, choose to enter the workforce or choose to be stay-at-home moms. And Simone de Beauvoir said, no, women cannot be allowed to make that choice, precisely because if they are allowed to, too many women will choose to stay home. End quote. No, that's a direct quote. Isn't that crazy? In other words, she's saying like the nature and the role of a woman that's almost like built into her biology and her DNA is to be a nurturer. And if we allow women to choose between the workforce and motherhood in the home, too many of them will choose the natural ordering. So we can't let them make that choice. That's second wave feminism. Okay, but it's a logical next step from the suffragettes and the first wave feminists that treat human beings as an atomized individual and began to give us a construction and definition of woman that was completely divorced from biological differences and genitalia, actually. She said women cannot be allowed to make that decision. Simone de Beauvoir writes that women must rebel against this destiny by, quote, watch this. How do women rebel against this destiny? Beauvoir says, quote, affirming herself as an individual. Honestly, what else is there to say? Genesis 3. For God knows that the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods. You're a god now. You're the only individual that matters. Seek your own self-interest. Live however you want. If it feels good, do it. And who cares who gets harmed or burned in the process? In one way, it's a tale as old as time. But in another way, thanks to Western civilization as a byproduct of Christianity that began to turn the world right side up from the ascension of Christ all the way to today, we began to actually return back to good ideas. And now those ideas are always attacked. They have to be dismantled. The whole thing has to be deconstructed. Okay. So first wave feminism gives us a definition of a woman that is an individual and atomized with no connection or obligation or duty to the family, and helps shift society from a family-centric vision to the individual-centric vision. So then second wave feminism bemoans the slavery of women under the thumb of the patriarchy. And the solution is to reject the nuclear family, enter the workforce, delay childbearing, and abort your children. That's the step between first and second wave feminism. First wave feminism says you're an individual, you're not defined by your genitals, your chromosomes, or your ability to procreate. You're an individual. Slay queen. So first wave feminism gives us this new woman, severed from all familial, cultural, social, and biological ties. Second wave feminism then says, now that you're this new woman, you need to throw off the chains. And those chains are largely due to men. And the way that you're going to be fully equal is to reject your role in the home. Leave your children, enter the workforce, wait to have kids until you can make a bunch of money and beat those men out there. And if you get pregnant, abort your children. While most people place third wave feminism starting in the 1990s, I believe the seeds of third wave feminism are way earlier. Okay, I'm going to try to prove it to you. A disciple of Simone de Beauvoir named Shulamith Firestone, have you ever even heard of Shulamith Firestone? Took Simone de Beauvoir's ideas about the oppressiveness of the female body and carried them to, let's call it, a dark but logical conclusion. Shulamith Firestone wrote a book in 1970, so 3 years before Roe versus Wade, called The Dialectic of Sex. At the conclusion end of her book, she says something both shocking and not shocking, because it's a natural next step. Shulamith Firestone and Simone de Beauvoir they exist in this ether between second and third wave feminism. They were laying the groundwork for the more radical third wave feminism that would shortly follow them. And it's shocking to read. But it's also like, oh yeah, I guess given everything I know about feminism, I guess you would go to that conclusion. So I actually have to read the whole paragraph to you. Okay, this is the end of her 1970 book, The Dialectic of Sex. She says, just as to assure elimination of economic classes requires the revolt of the underclass, the proletariat, right? So the communist idea, right? That to get rid of inequities, there's rich people and there's poor people, there's the bourgeois and there's the proletariat, requires the revolt of the proletariat. Okay, so she's saying just as that has to happen, and their seizure of the means of production so as to ensure the elimination of sexual classes requires the revolt of the underclass, women, and the seizure of control of reproduction. So there's a lot there. What is she saying? She's saying just like the communists had to seize the means of production through the revolt of the underclass to eliminate economic inequities, she's saying so too, to ensure the elimination of sexual classes and to the underclass women must seize control of reproduction. Are you following the analogy she's giving between the feminist revolution and the communist revolution? Okay, all right. She says not only the full restoration to women of ownership of their own bodies, but also their seizure of control of human fertility. She says the new population biology, as well as all the social institutions of childbearing and child rearing. She says, this is wild. And just as the end goal of socialist revolution was not only the elimination of economic class privilege, but the elimination of economic class distinction itself, So the end goal of feminist revolution must be, unlike that of the first feminist movement, not just the elimination of male privilege, but the elimination of sex distinction itself. Genital differences between human beings would no longer matter culturally. She continues, she says, the reproduction of the species by one sex for the benefit of both would be replaced by artificial reproduction. Children would be born to both sexes equally or independently of either, however one chooses to look at it. The dependence of the child on the mother and vice versa would give way to a greatly shortened dependence on a small group of others in general, and any remaining inferiority to adults in physical strength would be compensated for culturally. The division of labor would be ended by the elimination of labor altogether, and the tyranny of the biological family would be broken. Oh, when someone tells you who they are, believe them. Holy moly. What did we just read? 1970, y'all. Predecessor, or disciple, rather, of Simone de Beauvoir. What did she just say? She said, can I paraphrase? She said, I'm a communist. And just like we hate inequities between the rich and poor, and so we call for the proletariat to rise up and destroy the rich people so that everyone will share all wealth equally, so too, I hate the inequities between men and women. And to remove all inequities, we believe that the underclass, women, must rise up and destroy any and all sex distinctions itself. Wow. And the end goal is that the biological family would be broken. That's third wave feminism. That lays the groundwork for third wave feminism. Simone de Beauvoir praised this book when it was released and said it was correct. She said, quote, because women will not be liberated until they have been liberated from their children. And by the same token, until children have been liberated from their parents. Notice the vision offered by Shula Smith Firestone is that basically hippie communes raise your children, women no longer have to be pregnant, and we have artificial wombs. Now women are free. Why? Because we've eliminated all distinctions. The left hates distinctions in the created order. Of course, if women need liberation because of their children and their potential for children, then it is children and babies who are keeping women from liberation. That's not complicated, given the presuppositions. In all forms of feminist ideology, the child is the oppressor. And only when the child is or can be removed at the mother's wish can she be free. Therefore, feminism was always going to end in abortion. Always. The radical second wave feminists were writing all of their worst revolutionary junk in the lead up to Roe versus Wade. If you think that's a coincidence, you're an idiot. So that's first and second wave feminism. Natural, logical, consistent links. And natural extrapolation of applying those premises to more and more radical, but more and more consistent conclusions. Today, third wave feminism is simply the T in the LGBT. They are indistinguishable. But it was second wave feminists like Simone de Beauvoir and others who laid the groundwork for third wave feminism. Second wave feminists immediately embraced, celebrated, and welcomed the new science of gender that John Money was spouting in the 60s. Did you know all the second wave feminists love John Money, who's celebrated by pederast rights groups today like the North American Man-Boy Love Association? John Money okay, you probably know, but Reimer twins, David Reimer, had a butt circumcision. His parents took him to John Money at the Johns Hopkins University at his gender identity clinic and said, what do we do? And John Money said, cut his entire penis off and his testicle, the whole thing. And we'll construct rudimentary female genitals, raise him as a girl. They named him Brenda, put him in dresses, and then in puberty, pump him full of estrogen, and he'll never know the difference because of John Money's view of gender. All of the second wave feminists celebrated the gender theory of John Money. His theory of gender identity was celebrated by feminists because it meant that our bodies do not pull us toward any fixed norms of femininity or masculinity, which is exactly what Mary Wollstonecraft wanted, which is exactly what they all wanted. According to John Money, gender identity is totally separate and distinct from our bodies and from our genitals. Why? Because we're atomized individuals, where the real identity is sort of like a ghost that wears or owns a body the way that you own or drive your car. So for the feminists, this meant that we could demean, ignore, or mutilate our bodies because they're not an extension of our true selves anyways. And if they're not our true selves, then liberation from the prison of our bodies could perhaps be possible. Could this be the secret to women's liberation and the path to freeing women from their reproductive potential that turns them into a slave to their husband and children? Coincidence? What's that teacher say in the Incredibles movie? I think not. Literally, the father of gender theory in America, who performs the first transgender surgery on a minor because of this transgenderism belief, was the favorite of all the second wave feminists. Because the view of the body as a shell, as irrelevant, is detached from gender norms, social norms, biological identity, marital duty or responsibility. That's all divorced from your body now. The true self, according to John Money, is this intangible, immaterial ghost or something. And if that's the real self, right? And the body can be sort of ignored or demeaned or dismissed, then it no longer matters that he has male genitals and she has female genitals, that he has testicles and she has ovaries. In this vision now, none of that matters. And so a Simone de Beauvoir's true identity and person is distinct from her body. Therefore, throw off and ignore the uterus or female prison of the body because it's potential for procreating new life, and pursue your own self-interest because the body doesn't matter anyways. That was celebrated and embraced by second wave feminism, which leads, not coincidentally, but very logically, to third wave feminism, which is just the T in transgenderism. So how does gay marriage play a role in this radical egalitarian vision of erasing any and all differences between the sexes? And did Obergefell help usher in the mainstreaming of transgenderism? So let's connect the final pieces. Once the family is removed as the centerpiece and building block of society, and what's the family, right? Like, what is it? Well, it's marked by sacrifice, duty, and obligation on behalf of those who came before us and those who we're raising up who will replace us, with a recognition that the family is made up firstly of a man and then of a woman whose biological and social differences are so profound that sometimes 9 months later it requires a name. Okay, so that idea of the family's now been removed, and the atomized individual replaces it. Well, then it's only a small step to second wave feminism. Rather than women and men coming together in love and marriage to create children and rejoice in serving their family, woman is presented as a slave to her body, and men are presented as the enemy who simply ejaculate and then head off to build their businesses, wealth, reputations, and prestige. Of course, they ignore that the most profound way to influence culture, by the way, and change the world is at home in the rearing of children. The hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. But our new radical individualism says that our desires and self-interest are all that matters, social contract theory. So second wave feminism says women must be taught to see that despite how happy they report being at home, they're actually enslaved. And the way to fight this enslavement is to hire a stranger to raise your children while you head off to the workforce with your husband. And of course, because you're enslaved to your body, you should pump yourself full of poisonous birth control. And if you get pregnant, slay the child. That's second wave feminism. I believe Obergefell, that's right, the gay marriage fictional right in June of 2015. I believe it was June 26, 2015. I believe Obergefell becomes a step in between second and third wave feminism, but it is key to understanding how we got here. Remember, every communist and Marxist believes that inequalities are necessarily unjust and evil because they breed inequities. For example, while men and women are fundamentally equal in dignity and value, they are not equal. Do you understand what I'm saying? Meaning, man does not equal sign woman. They are distinguishable. That unequalness, that inequality leads to different conclusions for man and woman. Men can't bear children, women can. So that we're not equal in that sense. The vast majority of men hate being stay-at-home dads, while the vast majority of women want to be a stay-at-home mom. Women are naturally and biologically more inclined or gifted with empathy and caregiving. Men, not so much, or not in the same degree. So while we, as Christians or conservatives, might celebrate the different conclusions that our unequalness leads to, the left despises it. And now that woman has been defined apart from her genital differences, and the concept of sex distinction itself has been eliminated, well, then we are left with a definition of man and woman that is entirely socially constructed. Chromosomes, biology, genitals, organs, it's all been eliminated from our understanding of man and woman. And you can thank the feminists almost exclusively for that. So if marriage has always been based on biological differences, sexual complementarity, and the needs of children, but our entire understanding of man and woman now excludes those factors, then what the heck is marriage anyways? Matt Walsh, what is a woman? Maybe the next one needs to be, what is marriage? Oh wait, there was a book written by Ryan T. Anderson, Sheriff Gurgis, and Robert P. George. I recommend you read it. If men and women are essentially just the same, and our gender identities or gender roles are in no way tied to our bodies, then there's no reason why marriage should be only confined to a man and a woman. But ironically, it also means that a man can be a woman and a woman can be a man. Let me say that again. If men and women are essentially just the same, and our gender identities or gender roles are in no way tied to our bodies, then there's no reason why marriage should be only confined to a man and a woman. But ironically, that also means, given this understanding of human beings, then there's no reason why a man can't be a woman and a woman can't be a man. If the body provides no clues to our real identity, and we're just machines driven by the ghost of our soul, then the person we call mother and the person we call father are essentially just the same. The vehicle that holds their identity may look different, but that's just a random coincidence of nature, right? We just evolved, right? You're just electrified sludge. It's just all an accident anyways. So what's the difference really between a mother and a father, or a father and a mother, or a father and a father, or a mother and a mother? It's all the same. If you sever biology from identity, you hand power over to the state to define for us, Obergefell, what we used to allow human nature to define for us. But the same ideology and the same ideas that gave birth to the destruction of marriage, where now two daddies can have a child and deny them a mother, those same ideas naturally gave birth to transgenderism as well. Gay marriage brought us transgenderism. If marriage has to be redefined because our true selves, identities, and attractions have no connection to our bodies and their unique differences, then maleness and femaleness have no connection to bodily or physical realities either, in which case it's totally logical to believe that a man can be a woman and a woman can be a man. There's your conclusion. Did I build an airtight argument? Gay marriage brought us transgenderism. If marriage has to be redefined because our true selves, identities, and attractions have no connection to our bodies and their unique differences, then maleness and femaleness also have no connection to bodily or physical realities either, in which case it's totally logical to believe that a man can become a woman and vice versa. Gay marriage brought us trans. Feminism brought us gay marriage. So feminism is to blame. Thanks for tuning in today. Head on over to iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, give the show a rating and review. Until next time, I'm Seth Gruber, and this is The Seth Gruber Show.